Welcome back to the Australian Retirement Podcast, your source of retirement goodness delivered to you every Thursday. James O'Reilly here, and I've got a special guest in the studio, Dr. Stephen Liu from Everlab. Hello, mate.
G'day. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm doing well. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, likewise. Stephen popped up a little while ago for me because we were talking in particular about longevity and talking about how important this is for both retirees and, of course, pre-retirees leading up. So today is all about longevity. It's all about the fact that you might be out there doing everything that you can to financially prepare for a great retirement. But the reality is that if your health is not at a level that allows you to do the things that you want to do, then there's going to be a lot of compromises made, and we want to avoid those as much as possible for all of you.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I see firsthand a lot of these compromises that people have to make. And usually if you're at a stage where you are making those compromises, often, it's a little bit late. There are things we can do, but it's a little bit late. And that's why it's so great. I'm very passionate about this topic. And I think we probably chat even more about go beyond longevity, right? Go beyond lifespan and think about health span and think about quality of life and what good health in retirement actually means.
Yeah. Okay, so just if you are listening to this, you are in the right place. This is for you. So please dial in. This is definitely a conversation that should affect every one of our listeners. So hopefully it won't affect every one of our listeners, but it's at least relevant that way. So Stephen, I'll get started firstly, please. Would you share with our audience a little bit about your background and a little bit about you, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a medical doctor. I've been a doctor for more than 15 years now. So I actually started my career on the opposite end of the severity spectrum on what we're going to talk about today. So I started my career in cardiothoracic surgery and neurosurgery, and then I did advanced training in intensive care. So really looking after the sickest of the sickest people in hospital. And while that was an incredibly gratifying job, literally bringing people back from the brink of death, it really gave me a fantastic opportunity to see, hey, where are the real opportunities to optimize people's health so they don't actually end up in hospital? So, in Australia, we actually have an incredibly, fantastic health system, right? Especially in metropolitan cities, world-class care. But that's all reactive care. So if something bad happens, we can deal with it. We can deal with it really, really well. World-class care. But what I don't think we're particularly good at is actually preventing these outcomes. So, how do you think about a good outcome? Like if we save your life in intensive care, that's a good outcome for us. But what about for you? What about for the actual patient? They go home, their bodily functions aren't as good, their quality of life is reduced. They might not be able to return to work. They might not be able to enjoy their families. And sometimes we don't see that or appreciate that very much. And that's what I've now dedicated my career to, which is how to get in front of these things, how to really focus on preventing serious events from happening. We have a fantastic health service. Let's try not to use it.
Yeah, brilliant. Well said, mate. What's something surprising about longevity and good health in retirement?
What's surprising? I think, there's a few things, right? So one thing that often surprises, so they're good surprises, bad surprises. One thing that still surprises me, which is not a great surprise, is people's expectations. They could be cultural expectations. They could be personal expectations that aging, they have this picture of like growing old and you're hunched over a little bit and you're a bit slower and you're in your pajamas and walking to get the mail and you got a bit of a sore back. And that's kind of normalized in a way. And I think that's culturally, we really have to attack that because could not be further from the truth. We should not be having these expectations. And a good surprise would be all of my patients who in their 80s, 90s, and having fantastic, health, function, performance, being able to do all the things that they want, whether it's dancing, traveling. One of my patients is 98 years old and he cycles around Albert Park, right? Looking after their great grandkids in many cases, picking them up and, just being able to enjoy life to that capacity. I'm surprised. That's a good surprise. And I think a lot of people find that surprising and they think, that's great. That's so lucky, right? But what I think we need to do is actually take luck out of it and actually be a bit more methodical and practical about it, because I think most people can actually achieve that if we approach your health in a more personalized and preventative way.
Yeah. Thank you. Really well said. Yeah. I mean, that seems to me like such an obvious reason why people should care about longevity. And I myself, as an advisor, as you're saying that, I'm holding the light to myself, realizing that I do that to an extent too. You know, when I'm thinking about the likely trajectory of someone's retirement, you know, in my own mind's eye, I've got that natural bias to assume that when you enter your 80s, you're going to do less travel and you're going to be at home more and some of these sorts of things. And there's a lot of assumptions.
You should be enjoying your life to the max, right? You know, I think it's super achievable, and that's what excites me a lot about it.
As you were talking about this, and as we were going through discussing this particular podcast, there's been a particular member from many years ago that was really at the forefront of my mind through this, and his name's Dennis, and he had worked so incredibly hard to build his wealth. I think we describe him as a high flyer. He had an executive type role, was good with his finances, got divorced a little bit late, and that was obviously a do not pass go, do not collect $200 type experience. And so, but nevertheless, I met him at that point, and he just did everything that he could. He was relentless about just getting ready for retirement. He did wonderfully. We did everything that we possibly could to improve his finances, and we took advantage of almost every option available, and everything worked. And so he got to retire earlier than we anticipated. He was never in particularly good health, but at that point in my advisory journey, I really hadn't joined the dots as to what that practically that might have an impact in his retirement. Really, my focus too was, finances. I'm a financial advisor, so it stands to reason I should do that. But unfortunately, after only about 6 months, he had a really serious medical event, which meant that he can't fly at all. Yeah. So he had huge travel ambitions, and they were all, in essence, gone. But in addition to that, even the little things like being able to go and do hiking and some of those sorts of things, which he really valued, they're not available to him either. And he's doing a great job of still having a good quality of life given the circumstances, but his retirement is nothing like what both of us hoped it would be.
Yeah.
I remember having a conversation with him not long, a little while after the event, and he and he said to me, and I'll never forget the words or the look on his face. He said, all the money was not worth it. And if I'd spent even the smallest amount of my energy compared to how much time and energy and effort I've put into accumulating wealth over the last 5 years, if I'd spent even the smallest amount of that focusing on my health, like that would have delivered so much better outcomes for me than having done what I've done. And that for me really, really flawed my perception of retirement and what we focus on as people when we're moving toward retirement.
Yeah, what a story. I mean, sadly, this is not rare.
Yeah.
Right. I think most people come to a point in their lives where they would trade anything to be 20 years younger.
Yeah.
They would trade anything to be able to say, be more able-bodied, be less worried about the impact of their health day to day. And I mean, Dennis sounds like a very clever person, right? And it's not actually about how educated you are or how smart you are. Often these are blind spots.
Yeah.
Right. And, you can log into your bank account or log into your dashboard and see numerically and just be very data driven to say, like, what capital do I have? What my portfolio looks like. Most people don't have that with their health. So for folks like Dennis, a lot of them, just like I mentioned earlier, like culturally, they kind of think, oh, it's kind of bad luck. It sucks, but it's kind of bad luck. But that's actually not true. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited talking with you about this, because I think in many ways you and I are in this similar business. We're in the capital business. You're in the financial capital business. I'm in the health capital business. But, at any point in your life, sometimes there's a trade-off. But towards the, later parts of your life, post what is conventionally retirement age, we can talk about like what the concept of retirement is going to be in the future, right? With the different ways that people work. But really, those two pieces of capital really come together to form quality of life capital. And you can't have no money, but not having health and just having money is also quite limiting.
Yeah.
So you want to find that right balance. But I think for a lot of people, it's actually this blind spot. They make a lot of assumptions.
Yeah.
And our health system sometimes, because like I said, it's a fantastic health system, but it's very focused on reactive care. So when you're not sick, there's actually not that much emphasis on you, right? I've had a lot of like my patients come and say, oh, yeah, I've been to the doctor and they said, you're not sick, you'll be all right. But is the definition of good health not sick? Well, I would argue absolutely not, right? So there's a big gap between you're sick versus you're in optimal health. And a lot of people sort of in the middle. And if we can provide them with that visibility and be able to look into that blind spot, and that blind spot's different for everyone. Without knowing Dennis's circumstances, I can't tell exactly what that is, but there certainly was a blind spot that he realized later. And hopefully the best way to mitigate that is to get in front of it.
Before this chat, we had a little Zoom team session. We were talking about this podcast, and you said something to me that really floored me. I was talking about health expectancy. We've spoken on this podcast before about life expectancy. Everyone knows what that is, but health expectancy is of course, it's a similar thing, but it's not about when your life ends. It's when your health ends, when you are no longer able to do the things that you want to do. And I was speculating to you that health expectancy is very non-linear. You can be in really good health and then bam, this big event happens, like for example, a heart attack, for instance, or a stroke.
Or cancer diagnosis.
That's right. Yeah. And then suddenly at that moment, your health expectancy changes. And you challenged me on that and said, well, actually that's, yes, if you just look at the event in isolation, then yes, you would say that your health expectancy is very non-linear. One day you're in great health, then the event happens and your life's totally different. Yeah. But if you're looking at your health in a really analytical sense and getting the right data with regard to yourself and your own health, then you'll actually see that most of these events have been, I guess, precluded by events occurring along the way. Where for example, a cardiac event, that's not this sudden random one-off thing. There's probably most likely been an accumulation of health-related circumstances that have led to that over many years.
100%.
And you're at the front end of that. And fixing it. Well, now these events are a lot more linear than you realize. And I found that really amazing.
Yeah. I mean, in modern life, right, in a developed country like ours, and to be honest, in most of the world, it's not so much the tuberculosis that's killing us anymore. It's actually these chronic health conditions. Things like poor metabolic health and diabetes, metabolic syndrome, things like you mentioned, heart attacks, cancers, musculoskeletal problems like pain, degeneration, things like dementia, right, which is on the rise. And a lot of these disease processes are linear, but the perception of them, right, the symptoms are non-linear.
Yeah.
So as an example, like cardiovascular health. So I do a lot. This is my area of subspecialty. I do research in this area, genetic research, and trying to really predict who's going to have a heart attack, who has a high propensity to have a heart attack. But that process is very linear, actually. You build up plaque silently in your arteries, and then one day you have a sudden symptom, and it feels very non-linear. And a lot of people, again, to this day, they're like, so-and-so had a heart attack. Oh, bad luck. No, it's not luck. If we were able to get in front of it and be able to look in that blind spot and see, actually, this person's likely got plaque in the arteries. Let's find it 5 weeks out, 5 years out, 15 years out. We can actually change that trajectory. But the actual symptoms are nonlinear. Same with metabolic health. Actually, 2 out of 3 people in Australia actually have suboptimal metabolic health in some way, whether if it's insulin-resistant sugar processing, whether it's excess fat, hormonal dysfunction. The stats at Everlab at my service actually probably more than that. It's probably 3 out of 4 people. And it doesn't really have that many symptoms day to day, maybe some subtle things. But when you get kidney failure from it, it's very obvious.
Yeah.
Right? When you get cataracts, all of a sudden it's very obvious. Right? And that means it's too late. So absolutely, I think everyone should be empowered to understand the, non-linear symptoms does not mean, non-linear progress or disease processes. And that's quite different. I mean, it's about visibility, right? So you can log into your bank account long before you go bankrupt, right? So you don't want to suddenly, I went bankrupt, that's pretty unlucky. You can actually log in, you can see, you have folks like you to talk to and make a plan. Everybody's lives are different. Everybody's health's different. And you actually have to go through and understand, get the right data so you can get the right insights.
Yeah, very well said. I'd like to, if I may, move across to, in that vein, to the major health issues that you perceive for retirees and pre-retirees. And if I understand, you've tabled 5 that you think are the real, like the predominant things that your pre-retiree and retiree cohort should be focused on. Can we speak to each of those, please?
Absolutely. So the 5 major health areas are cardiovascular, cancers, musculoskeletal health, metabolic health and metabolic diseases, and then neurodegenerative conditions, such as dementias and such as Parkinson's disease. Now, if we can have good coverage for everybody, get a good grasp of your risk and your position on these 5 major conditions, that would cover, I think, 95, 98% of all the things that can detract your lifespan and health span as well, like your quality of life years. And these are the most insidious conditions. And just like I mentioned before, often one thing that they do have in common is a lot of them have no perceivable disease progression. It's only, you cannot feel osteoporosis. You can feel a broken hip. You can't actually feel it at all. Metabolic disease, there are a lot of subtle symptoms like tired, hard to shed fat, right? Not sleeping particularly well. Maybe you get sick a little bit more often. Very subtle things, but it's when you get that diagnosis of diabetes or you get, blood vessel disease or kidney failure, that becomes very obvious. And what we want to do is if we can get in front of all of these things, and, we can absolutely chat about all of these 5 things, that's how you can really get a lot of success in mitigating that.
Yeah, thanks. Let's go through each of these individually. We'll start off with cardiovascular. Maybe we spend a few minutes on each of them. And
sounds good.
Yeah.
I love starting with cardiovascular because that's my area, so specialty as well. And number 1 killer across the world, both men and women, if you include strokes. So women get a slightly reduced number of heart problems, but they get more strokes. So not just in the developed world, but also in the developing world. And it's the classic example of no symptoms until something catastrophic happens. 70% of people who have a heart attack have had no symptoms prior to the day. So my business partner's father, who's actually a patient of mine, he had a heart attack when he was 51 years old. He was at work and he had this crushing chest pain down his arm, and he was Googling himself, hey, chest pain in arm, what's going on? And said, hey, call an ambulance. Severe heart attack. It was just by luck that he survived because he was 8 minutes away from a great hospital. So the ambulance took him there. They put a stent in, saved his life. Unfortunately, the heart attack knocked off a huge chunk of his heart. So his heart will never be as good as before, but he's really lucky to be alive and he's doing fairly well now. Never had any symptoms before, and that's the most common situation. And also, a lot of people, 1 in 4 people who have the most severe type of heart attack, we call it a STEMI, which is a medical jargon for a particular type of heart attack, which is the most severe ones. 1 in 4 people do not have any traditional risk factors. They say, I don't smoke, right? I don't have diabetes. My cholesterol seems to be okay. 1 in 4 people have no traditional risk factors. So you really have to double click very carefully into it. But if you do, it's actually very preventable.
Yeah.
The number of cases that we're able to pick up and get in front of, whether if it's 5 weeks out, 5 months out. We've had someone who came through, no symptoms whatsoever, did yoga every day, interestingly also kept track of all of his cholesterol levels throughout the years. And he showed me, it's an Excel spreadsheet, right? He showed me, it's look, my cholesterol's pretty good. I'm a vegetarian. He's a vegetarian. But I really asked him to double click into this a lot more because he had five brothers and 1 sister. 2 of whom had cardiac disease. 1 brother passed away from. I said, your family history is way too strong for us to not do anything, right? Scanned his heart using an advanced test called a CT coronary angiogram. We use that at Everlab for screening, asymptomatic screening of high-risk individuals. He had 3 vessels blocked. He didn't even go home from the radiology center. He went straight to a hospital and had to have triple bypass.
Wow.
No symptoms. I mean, that was obviously a extreme case where he had 3 vessels blocked. It was like 98% blockage. And the cardiologist like, hey, look, I don't know how this guy's walking around without symptoms, but we're able to do a bypass surgery, and which means that his heart, the heart muscle actually was not damaged.
Yeah.
So his heart's as good as it was, it's better than it was before the heart attack. Whereas my business partner's father, every time I do look at his ultrasound of his heart, I'm reminded there's that part of the heart that's not moving. It's never going to move again.
Yeah.
And these are the cases.
Yeah.
I think a lot of your listeners will have had cardiovascular disease touch their lives in some way. Maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a friend. I have a lot of my personal colleagues, fellow doctors, lose parents at a young age, teenagers losing their dads.
Yeah.
It breaks my heart. Not just because it's a tragedy, but also because it's very preventable.
Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. Thank you.
A bit heavy. I know it's heavy stuff, but I hope it's a more of a hopeful discussion to say, actually, there is something we can do.
Agreed. Yeah. No, I'm glad we're here. Let's move on to cancers.
Yeah, that's better. Cancer is very different, but we should still approach it in a very personalized and data-driven way. And it's really about understanding who you are, understanding your risk, and understanding what's happening in the world. Right? Cancer rates actually gone up significantly over the past 30 years. Interestingly, in younger folks. So when I started medical school like 20 years ago, it's unheard of. Very rare to have like a young person have something like bowel cancer. Bowel cancer rates have gone up 80% over the past 30 years.
Why is that, mate?
I think there's a lot of, I think one day we'll look back and we'll say, we have a lot more confidence in what's causing this. But there's a lot of theories, and I think they're right. Ultra-processed foods, pollution, microplastics, low fiber diets, sedentary lifestyles. I think all of those things are contributing to this. And ultimately, we're not 100% sure, because if you think about what's happened in the past 30 years, people are also smoking less.
Yeah.
Right? So like smoking rates are down, but younger people are getting more bowel cancer, which is really concerning.
Yeah.
But cancer, and the Australian stats are, you can see on the Cancer Council as well, 1 in 2 people will have a significant cancer diagnosis in their lives before the age of 80.
Yeah.
And cancer's biggest weakness is early detection. But how do we do that? We really have to, understand your risk. Again, family history, how you live your life, genetics, and coming up with the right plan of action. Cancer is one of those things. If you pick it up early, like take bowel cancer, for example. If you pick it up at stage 1, almost 100% cure rate. So, if we didn't cure your stage 1 bowel cancer, something probably went wrong. But if we pick it up at stage 3B or stage 4, your likelihood of survival in 5 years is about 30%.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a dramatic difference. And here's the other thing. Early stage, no symptoms.
Yeah.
And that's the danger. If we don't have to create a service for appendicitis, right? If you have appendicitis, you'll tell us. You'll come to us, emergency doctor. These are things that are really silent.
Yeah.
I think just last year I diagnosed someone with late stage bowel cancer. It wasn't actually a regular patient of mine, but he came by because his regular doctor was away. He didn't really have a regular doctor. He just went clinic to clinic, and he's like, I'm just here to get my scripts and get my blood taken. And I found that he was low in iron. So that's unusual for you to be low in iron. Could you be losing blood anywhere? And he's like, oh, actually, I've been pooing blood for the past 8 months. And I was floored, and I said, hey, have you mentioned this to anyone, like a doctor or a nurse or a loved one? He's like, no, I'm a bit embarrassed.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. We sort of got on a little bit. I think he felt a bit more comfortable. And then I said, hey, no, that's really serious.
Yeah.
I organised for him to have a colonoscopy within 2 days. It was such a big tumour that the gastroenterologist couldn't put the scope past the cancer. It was that big.
Yeah. Now,
that chap's still alive.
Yeah.
Right? Chemo, radio, surgery, right? He's only in his late 50s.
Yeah.
So you think it's not going to happen to you until it does.
Yeah.
But it should. I'm also not here to fearmonger, right? It's really about understanding and say, let's just be more proactive about it.
Yeah.
Cancer's biggest weakness is early detection. different people should be doing different things. Like, ladies should be doing their cervical cancer screening and, bowel cancer screening and skin cancer. That's another big one, prostate cancer. And this sort of covers your area, which is it's an incredible cost.
Yeah. Yeah. Well. Hey, I can chime in here. Wonderful. There's a really well-resourced cost of health events paper, a white paper. It was completed by an insurer called Zurich. A lot of people will have heard of Zurich before, not the city, but the insurer. And they have looked at Australian health events and essentially determined average lifetime costs for these events. For most cancers, I think prostate and breast, the average lifetime cost was about $40,000. This is out of pocket, and it doesn't include lost income, which can be enormous. The lung cancer, for example, is about $90,000. And then we moved to some coronary stuff. I think heart attacks were about $96,000 was the average cost. Yeah. So, of course, noting the average cost, that could mean that in your circumstance, it could be much more. You might be lucky enough that for whatever reason, it's something that you can have resolved predominantly through a public service and your costs aren't too high. Yeah. But nevertheless, these are real costs. When we're thinking about people approaching retirement, and they had the foresight to know that sometime in the next decade, $100,000 of my wealth is going to just evaporate from a health event. Yeah. That's going to be pretty serious in terms of their retirement modeling and
really
where we think they're going to be.
Numbers. Yeah. I mean, like for me, it's so interesting, because as doctors, we don't really think about that aspect. Yeah. But it's such a big toll on your family. That's not a small amount. And I normally think about cost. I think about cost as well, right? But I think about cost in quality and function lost. The holiday that you can't go on anymore with your family, and, the pain that you have to suffer and the things that you wanted to do. And that actually compounds in a negative way too, right? Because if you have a musculoskeletal problem and you can't exercise, guess what that's going to do to you? It's going to make your metabolic health worse, it's going to make your cholesterol worse. So, these things actually compound as well.
Speaking of musculoskeletal, if I may, we'll move there. I was amazed to learn only today that 40% of forced retirements for Australians between 25 and 64 are due to back problems and arthritis. So back problems and arthritis alone account for 40% of people being forced to retire. Yeah. That's wild. Can we speak a little bit about musculoskeletal health in particular? Similarly, like what should people be doing from a preventative sense or in a preventative sense here?
Oh, 100%. So I think we can break it out. Musculoskeletal, muscles and skeleton, right? So skeletal health is pretty straightforward. Like I mentioned earlier, osteoporosis, brittle bones, vulnerability to fractures, right? I think most people that's probably one of the biggest things that retirees probably fear. Well, my patients who are older, their biggest fear is, what if I slip in the bathroom and break my hip? Right? Yeah. So, like my great-grandmother, who was very healthy, and eventually she passed away because she fell over and broke her hip. And that's not an uncommon story, right? But osteoporosis, you don't feel it at all. People say, I've got aches and pains. No, you might have joint problems. Osteoporosis is something that's you can't feel. Yep. But we can get in front of it. We can do a bone density scan. We can understand your vulnerability and your risk and find the right time to do that. So we profile everybody's bone density. Yeah. Because I think data is power here, right? And we do pick up like young people who get it too, especially females. The amount of bone density loss can be quite striking after menopause. Yep. And strong bones means fewer fractures. And that's critically important. Now, the other part of it, the muscular, the muscle area, sarcopenia, which is the loss of muscle, is becoming more and more focused. Right? People are focusing more and more on it, and it's critically important because having good muscle mass is one of the best predictors of actual health span and longevity.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I was amazed to learn how strong that correlation is.
In fact, a reduced, risk of Alzheimer's disease. Like, isn't that interesting? Yeah. Like, muscles to your brain, right? And my patients tell me these stories, right? One of my patients said he was at the beach and he saw a lady, I think it's a fancy area, like beachfront area, right? Some lady was like down at the beach. She didn't look particularly old, maybe like late 60s, early 70s. Went down the steps onto the sand, onto the beach, went to put her feet in the water. And when she came back, she didn't have enough strength to go up the steps. And she was stuck on the beach. she had to call someone to, like, so my patient actually went down and asked her, do you need a hand? So give her a hand to come back up. Now, unlike your kidneys and your liver, right, that work by themselves, you have to look after them, your body's meant to work for you. And you need your body to do the thing, to be functional, to be comfortable. You don't want to be in pain all the time, and certainly you don't want to be in so much pain or have so much debility that you can't do the things you want. I'm startled by these stats that you just quoted. I'm not super surprised though, because I see this.
Yeah.
Right, especially if you work, a physical job.
Yeah.
It can really impact your life significantly. So it's not just muscles, but tendons and joints, and all of those things need to be thought of together. So how do we actually protect people from having degenerative back problems? It's not, I'm going to have super strong bones. That's good. But it's actually, do you have enough musculature? Do you have healthy tendons? Do you use it? Because if you don't use it, you lose it, right? All of those things go hand in hand. And I see a lot of, this is one of the biggest roadblocks for grandparents, enjoying their grandkids. And sadly, my in-laws, right? So my father-in-law is, if you picture the stereotypical older person, he's it, right? He walks a bit slower, not very energetic, a lot of muscle wasting. And he likes to live like a quote unquote old person. In our culture, certainly, in Chinese culture, people sort of think when you're older, you should just get waited on. And I keep telling him, look, I want to wait on you, but
it's not helping you.
Yeah, but that's really not helping you. And it's really quite sad because, so we just went on this holiday and I wanted to invite him. So we went to Japan and I want to invite him because he loves going to Japan. And I could tell he wants to come, but in the end, he decided not to. He said, I'm going to hold you back. I'm going to be too slow.
Yep.
And that breaks my heart, because, he loves the grandkids. He wants to be together. And he didn't come.
Yeah.
And, if he were stronger, if he were more confident. And I see this with my patients too, when they think going out, they think, is there a lift? Who's going to help me with my luggage? Am I going to pull it off the conveyor belt? Will I need... What if I have to go up and down the plane on the stairs? People think about that. Like, we don't. And they're the big blockers.
I'm reminded too about a piece of reading a book a while ago about longevity, probably about 6 to 12 months ago. And it was talking about the fact that it becomes very hard to put on muscle mass as you age. If you're in your 30s or 40s and you want to put on muscle mass, then you're going to be able to do it a lot more efficiently than someone who's in their 50s or 60s or let alone 70s. At
Absolutely,
that point, at best in your 70s, you can't put on mass. All you can do is just hold your mass or as best you can. It's very difficult to put on more muscle. You're looking a little uncertain about that. Is that...
No. I was about to say, here comes another financial analogy, right? You look, when you're 70, you can put on muscle, but the cost is so much higher. Right? The amount of protein you have to take. So gram per gram. So for you to put on 1 gram of protein when you're 30, you probably need to ingest, let's say 3 grams.
Yes.
Right. Whereas when you're 70, that goes up to 6.
Yeah. Okay.
And your digestive system can handle that much. And we're also starting from a lower level. If you're already like my father-in-law, already quite sarcopenic, already low in muscle mass. It's so hard to turn around. Yeah, okay. Right?
But, and if I may, the byproduct of that, of course, is that if you're listening to this and you're in your 50s, for instance, the time to start protecting and building your muscle mass, it's so much more efficient to do that today.
Put it in the bank.
Yeah.
Just bank more muscle, bank more strength.
Yeah.
The early, just like investing.
Use
right?
it or lose it.
Just like investing, the earlier you do it, the more you have in the bank. And that also is a protection. That also is a protection against, if you do have an illness, right, you actually lose muscle incredibly quickly. You can lose up to 10% of your muscle in a week if you broke your ankle and you got to, be in bed.
Yeah.
Right. So put it in the bank. Mm-hmm. Muscle's a great thing. It also helps a lot with your metabolic health. Right. Really protects you from things like diabetes too.
Well, we've got to go there. I'm very mindful of time. We're going to have to hum through the last couple, but we've got metabolic health in particular. So can you speak to this and why this is important for people?
Absolutely. Look, I think I'm glad we've sort of covered the big ones. Metabolic health is an amalgamation of a lot of different areas. So how you process sugar, what your body composition is like. I think the key thing I want to talk about with metabolic health is a lot of people like to say lose weight or gain weight, and that's my pet peeve. Like, we don't deal in weight.
Yeah,
we should deal in body composition. You might have excess fat. You might be under muscle. You don't have enough muscle. You're trying to understand what that is, because we also see a lot of people who are trying to like lose a lot of weight, but that might not be particularly healthy, because yes, you lose fat, but you also lose a bunch of muscle, right? As we just spoke about, muscle is incredibly important, and you just have to like understand what your vulnerabilities are. Musculoskeletal health is very intricately tied with metabolic health.
Yeah.
And poor metabolic health function, it is pretty nebulous, right? It's how you process sugar, how your hormones work, what your body composition is like, your bodily function, liver function. But when you're in a suboptimal state, like I said, you don't really get a lot of symptoms, but that's one of the biggest drivers of the other conditions: cancer, musculoskeletal health, cardiovascular disease.
Yep. Thank you. And then if we move across to mental faculties, can we speak to this?
Yeah. So, I mean, like, a lot of people are very, very worried about Alzheimer's and dementia, and the rates are also going up. Right. So if you just look at an isolated condition, it is now the number one killer of women in Australia. I mean, it depends how you cut the stats. And it's also one of the biggest tragedies, because you're alive, but you're also gradually not yourself. I used to do a lot of geriatric medicine and visit nursing homes. It's a real tragedy. In many ways, it's a bigger tragedy than a sudden heart attack. And if you passed away from that, the burden that it puts on your family, and I imagine, that the cost of it as well, and the way that it saps your quality of life.
Yeah.
And even though there's no one biomarker that we can find, and really we don't want to keep doing memory tests until we realize you're losing your memory, but it's really about optimizing all the other factors that we talked about. Metabolic health, having good metabolic health is one of the best things you can do to minimize Alzheimer's disease and dementia.
Yeah.
Having a strong musculature, having good physical activity, the ability to do physical activity, is one of the best things you can do to reduce your dementia risk.
Yeah.
So like being able to do sports, right? Team sports, tennis, be outdoors, hiking, listen to music, right? Learn a language. All those things can mitigate that risk. But metabolic health, musculoskeletal health, really important for that.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. All right. Well, it's very hard to do those conversations without really them becoming a bit morbid, because in reality, we're talking about problems that can exist. But I'd love to move this conversation to what people can practically do, and why people need to act now. Like, I think about Everlab, for example, and the work that you guys do. Perhaps can you speak a little bit about to the work that you guys do and what that means for people?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I started Everlab because I wanted to make sure that people can have access to not just a great reactive care service, but a proactive one, to say a personalized, prevention-focused service. So most of our members and most of our patients are what you would consider healthy people. And what we're here to do is say, hey, where are your blind spots and how we can optimize your health moving forward. And by doing that, we mitigate those risks. So one of the best things that I think people should do right now is like make your health a priority, even when you're feeling well. And I think that's what people do, right? They say, oh, like I feel okay, so I've got other priorities. Actually, no, this is the priority. This is the biggest priority. And just because you don't have any symptoms, remember, these symptoms are non-linear. So just because you don't have any symptoms does not mean, your health is optimal. We should be much more data-driven. And if you think, I think I'm really healthy, come and prove it, right? Let's get really data-driven and do that. And, even if you're not ready to like take action right now, I think take an interest in your own health. Like, talk to your family. Don't go and, don't finish listening to podcasts and go integrate your family, but understand, what might run in your family. Have a think about your past history. Oh, I used to smoke when I was younger, right? Those are important pieces of information. Just take an interest in, when was the last time I saw the doctor for a, preventative checkup?
Yeah.
Am I up to date with cancer screening that I should have? Like, what am I at risk at? Start asking yourself those questions and really take an interest. Yeah. It's the best investment you can make.
Yeah, it's nice to you say that, and I, for what it's worth, I agree wholeheartedly. As we were talking at the very beginning of this, for everyone listening, you're all looking to invest your time and energy and money in order to have the best retirement that you possibly can. And one of the primary drivers around the success of your retirement perhaps the primary driver is not going to be how much money you have in the bank when you retire. It's going to be how able-bodied you are and the likely trajectory of your health. And in the same way that you're investing in your wealth with these sorts of podcasts, investing in your knowledge and trying to make sure you get the best outcome there. If you're not investing in your health and if you're not focused on it, if you don't have a good handle on it, then I implore you that this should be a priority. Now, as part of that, I'm proud to say that Rask has created a little benefit if you wish to go straight to Everlab and get your complimentary first call. Now, unfortunately, there's a pretty reasonable wait list at the moment to get into Everlab, which is I think speaks to what you guys are doing at the moment. But to confirm, if you book in your complimentary call on the Everlab website and mention that you've come through the Australian Retirement Podcast, they'll actually bring you forward in the queue so that you can have that prioritized.
Yeah, we
love
love to be able to offer you access as soon as possible. And, it's really a privilege to see that people are taking an interest in this. And yes, we do have a long wait list, and we want to get as many people through this as possible because we want you to be able to be on the right track as soon as possible. But we also want to make sure that, we offer a very detailed service. So make sure you have the right quality of care too.
Yeah. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for your time today. That, as always, super informative. And I know that you're going to be on the show again. We're going to be talking about some other fun stuff. So a real pleasure today and looking forward to you being on the show in the future.
Thanks very much. After we come off, I might need to ask you about some financial advice.
No worries. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Again, happy Thursday. If Thursday is the day you're dialing in, of course. And of course, next Thursday, we will have this show available for you again. So please keep dialing in, keep the feedback. If you've got any questions, we would love to get them from you. We love nothing more than questions from all of our listeners. So thank you for being part of the show.
Thanks for watching this video on the Rask Network. While you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get videos each and every day on business, finance, investing, and so much more.